Well, probably wasn't the best time for me to buy an electric car since the whole grid's going to die and, we're be living in campfires.
Yeah.
But gasoline also won't be available.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm built for Mad Max, Like,
but that's the flaw in Mad Max is that who is still refining gasoline at that point?
Yeah.
I don't recall, and maybe they do, but I don't recall them ever addressing like, oh, well, civilization collapsed and it's a barbarian society built on car races in the desert. But also, there's guys deep drilling in the Gulf.
Well, I think in that Furiosa prequel, they do deal with the people that refine gasoline, but where they're getting the raw materials, I don't see a lot of oil drilling going on.
I'll never know. Anna Joy Taylor freaks me out. She's got weird eyes.
Yeah, well, the movie isn't good anyway. So, all right, everybody, we are back with Off Day with Ballpark Nation. As usual, Andy Tom Chesson is with me. Andy, good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm hoping we were recording the scintillating conversation we had about the lack of viability of the whole Mad Max universe. But we can throw that in somewhere if we need some filler.
Yeah, I'll pop that in somewhere. We were, in fact, there was a dynamic conversation about that. Speaking of Wasteland,
Happy New Year, by the way. Have we done this year? I don't think we've done this this year.
We have done this year.
You've done some episodes because you replaced me with a dog. We did
our first one this year.
But then you replaced me with a dog and then some bodily functions. Maybe not in that order, but
no, our first premiere episode was January. Was before before the Cotton Bowl.
Oh, speaking of the
Cotton Bowl, we were supposed to do a second one, and then I got sick. Speaking of the Cotton Bowl, a couple of things I want to bring up. One, my assessment of this Longhorn team in this season is that it was a great season. There's really no way around it. There are only 5 seasons in Longhorn football history that are clearly better. The 4 in which they won the national championship, and the 1 in which Colt McCoy lost to Alabama in 2009. I think they're giving a lot of shit to yours, and it's weird. You can have both things, Andy. You can be appreciative that he was a great quarterback, and also see that the team might be better with the next guy. As someone without orange blood glasses or orange glasses, what did you take of this season? And we'll get into the Cotton Bowl in a minute, but
I'll go to the macro view first. I think that one of the things that separates college sports from the pro ranks, and I know those lines are getting blurrier and blurrier every year, is that in the pros, because they are paid professional athletes, it's okay, I think, to say that you either won the championship or it was a disappointing season. Maybe that's not true of every stage, for every franchise in every sport, but in general, that should be the goal. In college sports, I think there's room to say making the playoffs is a successful season. Winning your conference is a successful season. Winning your bowl game for the longest time was the mark of a successful season. Beating your rivalry team was the mark of a successful season. You guys won, 13 games?
13 games.
So 13-2?
13-3.
13-3, that's a successful football season. You made it to the quarterfinals, semifinals, whatever it was right before the championship game. The Final Four, if like a better term.
Four, yeah.
You're one of the 4 best college football teams of the year. I don't know anybody who can grouse about that other than if we didn't win, the whole thing's worthless. And I can tell you, speaking as a perennial 8-5 team, we would love to win 13 games and not have it take 2 years.
Oh my God.
That would be fantastic.
I do want to address all or nothing guy. I have to think that they're generally speaking a failure in life, if that's their viewpoint, because I think people project their own shortcomings or misgivings or lack of self-awareness onto the teams they follow. I do agree with you. In most sports, an all or nothing professional thing is a way to go. I would argue baseball is different because of just how different the playoffs are compared to how the regular season is, and they're not really.
But even then, you can point to a playoff berth, which in baseball is a little bit different, or winning the division, which is the true mark of what happened over a 162 game schedule.
Yeah.
I think football, basketball, hockey are all probably in kind of a similar boat, though. When you're a pro, you either won some level of championship or you didn't, and that's the mark of a successful season because so much else is driven by it. I don't think college sports necessarily, it certainly helps, but are necessarily driven by being the national championship program. For instance, Alabama had a very off season this year for them, and they still sold out their stadium. They're still going to have record number of season tickets sold next year because there's more than just being attached to a city that comes with being a college sports fan.
Yeah.
And Texas is in the same boat. I mean, you've got big progress in your first year of the SEC, which a lot of people were telling you, even on this show, that you weren't going to do. And you've got a lot to build on. I think you've got some holes that are going to pop up because it looks like the portal is going to start. Portal and draft are going to start eating away at your roster a little bit, but you guys have the opportunity to build through the roster, through the portal and the extended deadline you have for signing guys, and then the spring portal opening up as well. So you're going to have to replace Golden or Bolden. Your receivers should have names that are a little bit dissimilar.
I know, right? For the longest time,
everyone is declared for the draft, and I think people are expecting Isaiah Bond to potentially go to the portal.
Well, he was a disappearing act this season anyway. So
Jaden Blue, I think, was a little bit of a surprise that he's going to the draft because I can't imagine an NFL team is happy with his ability to not hold the ball.
But that to me was a writing on the wall situation with CJ Baxter coming back and a freshman they're really excited about. Like, the carries were going to get few and far between, I think, for him.
Well, and Wisner outperformed him as soon as he got an opportunity. I mean, you could tell by usage patterns by the end of the year. So I think next year will be interesting. Will you be as good as you were this year? I have no idea. Will you be better at quarterback play? I think that's the thought of most Texas alumni. It'll still be interesting to see what Arch Manning does over the course of an entire season because he is still young in his football career, even though he has a great pedigree and bloodline and has got to sit and study for most of 2 years.
Which, first of all, is a real credit to him anyway, because how many modern day quarterbacks would have been okay with that?
Well, I mean, Cooper makes his money, and he has that whole real estate deal in West Campus to keep Arch satisfied. Here, just have another car, Arch. You're fine.
Here you go, Arch. Let's get to the game. It kind of felt like the Longhorns did a really good job for all but about 25 seconds of trading blows with Ohio State. It really turned into a heavyweight match, which no pundit, except for the people on this show, thought was going to happen. Everything was, this is going to be a buzzsaw. The game will be over before it begins. It clearly could have been, but wasn't. But outside of the last play of the first half and essentially the last play of the second, Longhorns really, I think, outdid what most national people thought they were going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it was a close game until it wasn't. So, Ohio State ended up winning by 2 scores, but it was a one-possession game for a good chunk of that game. I think it does come down to a failure of an offense to score points and had some ill-timed turnovers. I don't think there's ever a great time to have turnovers, but there certainly are worse times to have turnovers.
Up by 40 and you throw a deep pass, it's the same as a punt. That's a perfect go time for a
yeah. I mean, I think that's fine. That's not exactly what all happened. No. But I think you have to acknowledge that Texas played well. Ohio State played better. They're a team that has gotten hot at the right time. I think some of that's getting healthy at the right time. I think that defensively, you have the number 1 and the number 3 ranked defenses in the country playing against each other, and that kind of bore out. At the end of the day, Ohio State looked bigger to me on defense, and that doesn't really mean anything other than they were at key positions, especially linebacker and defensive end, a little bit faster, a little bit bigger, and a little bit more disciplined. And I think
more disciplined. I think also Ryan Day out-coached Sark. I think, for example, that quarterback draw on 4th and 3 where they ended up getting 18. I want to talk a little bit about Sark because I do believe that there is a great coach in him, and I do believe that he will win a national championship at Texas at some point. I do think he's also still kind of growing into the job, because while he did have coaching jobs prior to his alcoholism coming to fruition, it was kind of a different sport already, and certainly in a different league, and certainly in a different environment. I have to believe, though, despite the two major coaching errors in the 1st and 1 situation, 1st and goal from the 1, where why isn't Arch in the game? Because that's what he's been really good at for you this year. And all you have to really do is run 4 straight times, and he's going to accidentally get into the end zone one of those times, versus what happened. As a neutral observer, I mean, what were your thoughts on just watching that whole thing play out?
I think that one of the issues that, fans have, I guess, with the Arch Manning piece, why wasn't he in? Evidently, he had a concussion. So he didn't go back in the game because of that. I haven't seen
bell rung on that the one run
in the one play. Yeah. So that was at 4th and 2, and he picked up
8
yards. I think
yeah.
he wasn't going back in the game, but I think we've talked about it on the show, the broader question, and we've talked about things Sark needs to do differently. And frankly, from my point of view, I hope he doesn't really learn ever.
Yeah.
Is that he gets a little bit too cute. He gets a little bit too – sometimes the obvious play, the obvious offense is the right offense. And I think he outsmarts himself sometimes. And I wonder if similar – I'm not comparing Jimbo Fisher to Steve Sarkisian, but I wonder if at some point you need to have a true offensive coordinator that maybe doesn't even call plays, but has somebody that can get on the headset and say, Sark, this is what you're doing is not right. Or you need to look at this. Here's the tendencies.
I'm guessing Kyle Flood doesn't feel like he has that position.
Probably not. And I think Flood's background is offensive line, and that's what he's good at, and that's probably what he focuses on. And I guess he's the run game coordinator too, because we throw different titles at coordinators now to give them more money. I don't know why you just don't give them more money. But that's a whole different show. But I think that we said it last week. We've said it a couple times this season. There's times where it's very obvious that Texas could dominate games by just running the ball.
Yeah.
And Sark has chosen to pass the ball often in those situations, and it's caused kind of a bog down of the offense because it's impossible to get a rhythm. You're not taking advantage of what should be a mostly NFL player offensive line. And so it kind of bore itself out in the Cotton Bowl, where you've got to be able to get 1 yard when you need 1 yard at the goal line. And yes, you're playing against the number 1 run defense, and you're playing against the number 1 overall ranked defense, but you've got to be able to get in the end zone. And Texas wasn't able to do that. And I never understand lining up in a shotgun in those positions. I never understand the swing pass in those positions unless you've really set up that pass. And he didn't do any of that. It was just, you can kind of almost guarantee that he's going to pass the ball in these situations, and defenses can relax a little bit and focus on that. And I think that's what you saw. And Ohio State is a very good defensive team and took advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It is something that I do think he'll get better at, because I think the Jimbo Fisher comparison is a good one, but it's also not, because I think Jimbo Fisher came in feeling like he had nothing to prove. Like A&M was lucky to have him. Sarkisian, I think, still feels like he has something to prove. I don't think that he's going to let these opportunities slip very, 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 very often. And I wonder too how much he was stymied by watching the Longhorns have so many teams in first and goal from the 1 and them not scoring. I mean, I wonder if he was like, whoa, I've seen us do that. It just seems silly to challenge such a talented defense, that especially with their ability to go side to side. It does seem silly. It does seem eventually you're going to work that in inch by inch by inch, especially if you're just running quarterback sneaks.
Well, I mean, you have 2 first-round tackles. You have guards that are projected when they go into the draft to be 2nd or 3rd round guys. You should be able to get a yard. Even against the best defenses. And I think until you do that on a consistent basis, you get caught in your head a little bit. I think that's what happened to Sark. And the comparison to Jimbo wasn't about stages in their career. It was just having somebody to check them every now and then about, hey, just take the simple answer, because sometimes that should work.
Yeah.
And I hope for your sake that, or maybe it works out for you, the A&M boards are rooting for Jerry Jones to hire Sark away, which I think is a great mark of how far Sark has come, because nobody was worried about Sark taking that job 3 years ago.
Yeah.
From an opponent's side. And now they're making up rumors about him, interviewing with NFL teams.
Yeah. I don't know that I think if any of that happens, it's definitely a, hey, CDC, give me more money because I could go coach for the Chargers. And I think he would get it.
Yeah, I don't think he's leaving, but I think any college coach that leaves for the NFL, the reason will be the transfer portal and NIL stuff that's just got happened. And it's the quality of life that you have as a NFL coach is much better, even for less money, than the quality of life you have as a college coach, which
especially
is now,
at universities like ours, where
it's a 365-day a year job. Maybe you get Christmas Day off, but probably not. I've seen plenty of recruit announcements or commitments on the 26th. So, somebody was working on the 25th for that to happen. I think that's another interesting point that you brought up about Sark and his growth as a coach. Being the head coach at Texas, it is, I know Mac got a lot of grief for being a CEO type coach, but that's what you kind of have to be. Mm-hmm. And I think Texas has done something really interesting where they've taken a lot of things off of Sark's plate so he can focus on the things he's really good at. Recruiting is a machine that runs with or without Sark. Sark is the closer in some of those some of the deals, but he's not having to beat the bushes. And I mean, there's a whole organization. And I think what you're getting to, and I think what you're going to see most major colleges do, and Texas is kind of at the forefront with a couple of others, is building a program that is independent of the head coach. Mm-hmm. So if Sark does leave, everything doesn't leave with him. And I think one of the things you're seeing at schools, I can tell you from an A&M standpoint, Jimbo leaves, everything went out the door with Jimbo, including the good parts of the Jimbo regime. Someone left, everything that was good and bad went out the door, and you're constantly rebuilding everything. But you've also made that head coach the face of your program and responsible for everything. And I think what we've gotten to, or trying to get to with Elko, is similar to what you guys have done with Sark, where recruiting is its own program. NIL is its own program. Keeping the current roster happy is its own program, and we've got people in charge of that. And the head coach is ultimately responsible, but Sark is mainly responsible for calling offensive plays and keeping his team motivated, which he did a good job of this year. And you get a lot of the other stuff out of the way. I think what you're going to see next year with Elko is, I don't know if he's going to get to the point of calling defenses, but he's going to be able to focus on some things and have some other things happen that are under his supervision, but not under his direct control. And I think that's healthier, because you can't consistently be rebuilding entire football programs. You saw what that looked like with Charlie Strong leaving after Mac, and you saw what that happened with Tom Herman. Yeah. Everything goes out the window, and you have to start over every 3 or 4 years. That's not great.
No, it's not. And
that turns into a decade wandering in the wilderness.
Well, I mean, it literally was more than a decade for us wandering in the wilderness, right? It was like 15 years. So, I really agree with that assessment. That's a really interesting take on that. And I do hope that's where Texas is getting to. I see Texas, if everything goes right with the way they're recruiting and the way the momentum seems to be going, as being able to have a run similar to what Alabama or Georgia had, but it all has to stay in place. Everybody has to understand what their role is in the job, not feel like they're bigger than any one person, and hope, as Mac famously said, that the BBs stay in the box.
Now, you're about to start talking about the BBs. I felt
the BBs, yeah. Now Mac is moving back to Austin, so maybe they're going to have him come in, and there's been talk about him having. There's been talking about him as the president of the University of Texas, which I don't think would actually happen. That would be a pretty bad choice for UT. But
is it 1957?
It's not. It's in fact not.
Okay, because I mean, that's usually where the football coach becomes the AD and then the president of the school, just because.
Well, I want to move to our conversation. It's still about the Longhorns, but I want to talk about bitches on the internet. And yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Female dogs or actual bitches?
No, we're gonna talk about actual bitches. So there's a famous shot, now famous, of Michael Taff, who is Jessica's favorite player on this team. She likes the scrappy blue collar guys. She didn't marry a scrappy blue collar guy, so she has to get that
scrappy.
out. Yeah, well, I'm something. But he walked about 20 feet into the tunnel and he just started to yell. He started to get angst out. And then you get, obviously, the Twitter reaction from fans of your fan base, fans of the Sooners, were making fun of the kid. But I get that. That's not people in the industry having an opinion. What surprised me is Nick Bonito of the Denver Broncos basically on Twitter mocks the kid. And then literally, Andy, the next day is crying in the locker room after the Broncos lose. I don't know what we're doing here. Like, why can't, I mean, I get that they're getting paid now, but they're still kids in that situation. And I do think you still get more emotional investment from a college football player than you do from an NFL player. And he should have known better not to make any comments like that.
Well, I mean, not excusing anything, but Nick Bonito did matriculate at the University of Oklahoma. So I understand there is a rivalry aspect to that.
I didn't know that. I should really – okay, well, that answers all my questions.
But, yeah, being tone deaf and having empathy. Also, the entire time that Nick Bonito was at OU, I don't think they actually played for anything, so I don't know how emotionally invested he was. Because they were on, their continued downslide while he was there. If I'm looking at the years right, yeah. Anyway, no, it's a bad look overall. I want to see that the players care as much as the fans do. I do understand the need to have some detachment when this is your job, basically, whether you're a college athlete or not. Yeah. And emotions can't drive everything, but they need to drive some of it. It's the motivation to want to win, to make those extra inches, to take the extra step, to do all the things you need to do to be a winner on a winning program, on a winning team, and win championships. You see that in every sport. Some of my best childhood memories are saddest because baseball breaks your heart, but watching Jose Cruz cry in a dugout after a game, or Billy Doran cry in a dugout after a game, because they're emotionally and physically spent. They've given all they can, came up short. And I assume that's what was going on with Michael Taff. I think if you're a player and you don't experience that, you either haven't played for anything or you just didn't care to begin with.
Yeah. I find it interesting when I think about particularly our two schools and the traditions of those two schools, where we're always going to have guys on our team that are going to be fifth generation Aggies or fifth generation Longhorns, and they're going to be the heart of those teams because wearing burnt orange matters to them. Quinn Ewers was actually one of those guys. I think a lot of people think he just sort of bailed out of Ohio State, but he wanted to come to UT, and it was a real – I think the Tom Herman and the NIL thing is why he did initially commit. But I think that our teams are going to be better for the fact that there's always going to be people out there that if you cut them, they bleed maroon or they bleed orange. And we need to encourage more of that instead of discourage it through bullying. It's the only way I can think about it, online bullying.
Well, I know that you have your own personal relationship with the term toxic masculinity, but this is kind of stuff that I think when you're talking about what the negative of masculinity is, it's this kind of stuff. Allowing people to feel their emotions and not have to face repercussions for having emotions. There's an entire part of my fan base that hates Kirk Herbstreit because he got emotional during the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. And he teared up on TV, and they continue to make fun of him to this day because he dared to have an emotional opinion about something. And yeah, a lot of it's just talk on the internet. A lot of it is guys puffing up for the sake of puffing up. But it's a deeper thing when we talk about, and this is not this show, but it's a deeper thing when you talk about the squelching of men in this country. about how they feel things, when they feel things, and how they show that they feel things.
Sure.
And it's, you've got to be a man. You've got to keep your emotions to yourself. You've got to stay strong, all that kind of stuff. And I just don't know how much of a place it has in 2025 anymore.
Well, I think what's interesting,
it's making a comeback.
Yeah, but you and I are different cats. We're different cats in the sense that for me, I actually find it endearing to the player. Like, you clearly, like you said, you left it all out there. You're not crying because you lost. You're crying because you're physically exhausted and there's absolutely nothing else you can do and you came up short. Like, it isn't like I'm being a little bitch and I lost. It's I have nothing left to give at all and I lost. It's different.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And I'm glad that Nick Bonito got to experience it the same weekend.
24 hours later or something. Oh my God. So speaking of not a whole lot else to give, the Astros are over, we think, the first tax threshold, but there's still a lot of holes in the outfield. Whereas LA has Angels there, we have a bunch of JAGS, just the guys. First of all, what can you tell us from your assessment of where the Astros are over the tax limit? Only, and I said to people who are not maybe used, it's not exactly as black and white as people think it is. So maybe talk through where you think the Astros are, and do you think there's still a hope of a free agent outfielder getting signed?
Well, I guess math is hard, Jim. Because depending on who you want to listen to, we're either right under or right over the first salary tax threshold, and that's a mouthful. It'd be easier just to say salary cap, but we don't say that because
people get real mad.
Players Union does not like that. So I think, based on what I've been able to glean and some sources that I trust on the internet, that I think we're like $3 to $4 million over the first threshold as of right now. That's without addressing anything to do with player movement or anything else. Now that we know what our arbitration eligible guys are going to be making next year, it looks like we're just a tad over. Maybe we're a tad under. I don't know. The reason nobody knows is because it doesn't really matter until the season is over and Major League Baseball tells you what your payroll was.
Right.
So you don't really know. You can guesstimate and you can have a good idea, but you don't really know where you are towards that threshold. I think the Astros are at a real interesting inflection point that they're close enough that they could go either way. If the season doesn't go the way they expect it to, it will be fairly easy for them to shed enough salary to get under whatever tax threshold and save that amount of money. If they're in a position to win the division and have home field advantage and make a key pickup, like in the outfield, which it looks like they're going to need to do, then you know that you're in your second year of paying this tax and you know what that window looks like. And maybe there's movement that offsets a little bit of that. And I'm thinking a Ryan Presley move out kind of deal to shed that $14 million. But either way, us worrying about the salary cap doesn't do a whole lot of good until October. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter from the point of the construction of the team opening the season, because you've got a lot of time to figure it out, so to speak. Having said that, I think arbitration was a big reason we've seen no movement in the outfield, and that we are currently looking at opening the season with a Dubon, Myers, McCormick left to right kind of outfield, which I'm going to say that would be towards the bottom of offensive output as far as outfielders go. You want to call Yordan Alvarez a left fielder, I guess that's great, and then that jumps us up into the middle. But the Astros, as they are currently constructed, are banking a lot on Chas McCormick having a hell of a bounce back year and somebody stepping up in left field. And I just don't know that that's viable. And I don't think that Dana Brown is dumb enough to think I don't think he can't even refer to the back of the baseball card with these guys right now. So he doesn't even get that for a couple of months.
He can say that 1 October, that one time we can do that. Astros have shown interest in Alex Verdugo. Is that an upgrade for you? Is that a move you would think should be made?
I mean, I think Verdugo is a league average left fielder, or at least he was in Boston. I know he struggled in New York. I assume that's because he had to shave his beard, and you're constantly facing shaving. And that's, as you and I know, we don't like to do that. That takes a lot of mental,
a lot of work.
he might not have, but he's decent. He's a above league average baseball player, left fielder. If he could get back to his production in that he had in Boston, it would be an improvement over anything we have on the roster right now. I know there's some thought that Jacob Melton or Zach DeCenzo is going to be able to play, contribute at some point in 2025. You're banking a lot there, although the Astros might be in a position where that's what they do for a couple of months. There is still thought that Anthony Santander is in play for the Astros. I think they have to pick up a guy that's a left-handed bat regardless, and it might even be a Ben Gamble type who has performed well in his brief stint with the Astros. That's just a contact guy because our outfield profiles right now really right-handed, with not a lot of power, and I think
a lot of contact for some of them.
And not a lot of contact. They'll be good defensively, but you're putting a lot of pressure on Paredes and Walker to live up to their billing, and they're going to need to for the Astros to be one of the top 4 teams in the American League. I still think they win the division as the roster's constructed now, because you look at what's going on. The Rangers are banking on guys all having bounce back seasons and making some questionable signings and trades. The Mariners have done absolutely nothing. The Angels are absolute garbage, although they seem to be rumored or linked to every free agent. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's kind of like the Blue Jays, where they're linked to everybody, but they end up signing nobody.
Yeah.
And then the A's, who look like they're on the come a little bit, but they still got a long way to go. And I think they had some guys overperform in a low-pressure situation last year.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how playing half their games in a minor league stadium affects them, because I think
they might have a sellout for the first time in a while.
They're going to have that. I mean, they will play before more fans than they played for a lot of home games last year, but that's not Oakland's fault. That's John Fisher's fault, which is another topic. So I think the Astros still win the division, but it's now a matter of, do you want to compete with the Yankees? Do you want to compete with the Tigers, with the Royals, with other teams that have playoff aspirations as well? And I got to believe Dana Brown and Jim Crane want to do that. So it seems to me there's got to be another outfielder that comes from somewhere. I still think the most likely thing is that we talk Ryan Presley into accepting a trade somewhere that's going to let him be a closer. I think he's better in that role. I don't think he's a 7th inning guy or an 8th inning guy. He proved that it wasn't a great fit for him last year. He is on the downside, but he's still a guy that's going to pick up 30 saves in the right situation. I think you could talk him into that, free up some salary that would allow you to spend a little bit more, or even trade him outright for an outfielder. There are some teams that you could do that with. So I think it's a more to come sort of thing, but I've got to see the Astros. I've got to think they're going to make at least one more move in the outfield for a left-handed bat.
And like we said, they're either a smidge over or a smidge under. So you could theoretically sign an outfielder to a decent contract and not go over the second one, because the second one is really where the team gets hit hard when they go over that limit, because the percentage goes up. Don't they lose a draft pick too or something? I mean, it's all
the percentage goes up. You lose international money, and because we'd be 2 years in a row, it's like double or one and a half times or something. It's lottery math, and frankly, it's not something we should have to worry about. It's an owner problem.
Yeah,
and if you're making a deep playoff run, it kind of pays for itself.
No, that's true too. Yeah. Absolutely. Now, one of the things we wanted to talk about today were, for those of you who only want to talk about sports today, now's the time to click off. I have become, and you've been for a while, a Legos guy. I was curious to find out what you got into it and what were some of the favorite sets you've been in. Like, why do you continue to do something that many people would say is for kids?
Well, lots of people like puzzles. I've had the benefit of having kids live in my house up until this past year. So I didn't have to be a full-blown Lego guy on my own. I didn't have to build sets because I had kids, so I could justify getting them a set and then helping.
Yeah, right.
And I think I freaked my wife out for the first time. Claire moved out or went to college last August, and I had the Ghostbusters set that next weekend ready for me to build for the for Ecto-1. which is a large build. For those that don't know, I was 2,700 pieces or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it's a cool build. For people who like puzzles, you like construction, it's not mindless exactly, but you have to focus on it, but you don't have to think about it a whole lot.
Right.
For me, it's a stress release. I like having the items. I don't build everything I could possibly build. I certainly don't spend that kind of money, but there's things that I want that are kind of meaningful to me. So Ecto 1 was one of them. I've lost it. The DeLorean from Back to the Future was another. I was literally looking for Batmobile 66 from the TV series because there's probably 4 vehicles that meant a lot to me that weren't Star Wars related growing up as a kid. Those were 2 of them. I don't think we're ever going to see a General Lee for some obvious reasons. There's nothing on the roof.
That's weird.
There's supposed to be something. Anyway, so I was really happy that they released a lot when I was a kid watching TV. And I guess if Kit ever comes out.
Oh, that would be sweet. And they get
You'd need that. Awesome. But there's a handful. So that's kind of my thing. And that's expanded. My son bought me the Apollo lunar landing module for Christmas. So I built that, I think, the day after Christmas. But it's just fun. It's a release. And I can sit on a rainy, cold winter day and not have to worry about anything. My dogs hate it. So that's the downside, because it is literally like 6 hours of me not paying attention to them.
Right. How dare you?
And if you've met my lab, he's the saddest dog who ever lived, despite having everything in life handed to him, and our entire lives revolve around him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because I'm new to it, and part of me got into it because last Christmas I helped Braxton do one, and then was like, this is really cool. And then the first one I got a text message from 1 million people when the JAWS set came out, and you have to try this. And so then I was like, well, I got to get a smaller one to get better at it. And now I'm halfway through doing Diagon Alley. I still have some big ones that I want to do that Jessica wants to help me with. But to me, it's like you said, not exactly mindless. It's just, I can do something that there's an end result that's productive. So you always feel good when you do that. And like, I didn't really want to watch the Horns game, so I listened to the radio, and then I did the Lego set, and I was able to focus on the radio without feeling as stressed out during the game as I sometimes am. So to me, I think it's a lot of fun, and I'm sad it took me so long to get into it.
Yeah, and if you haven't done it, if you are interested in building a set and it's not something that you've done since your childhood or really a really long time, the bigger sets come a little bit more organized than they used to, because when I was a kid, a box of Legos was a box of Legos, and even if it was a set, you had to figure everything else out, and the instructions were there, but they were kind of vague, and it's very well laid out. But what I like is the larger sets, everything comes in a numbered bag, and it's a nice stopping point. So when I built the Ecto 1, I think it's 6 bags or 6 sets of bags. I broke that out over a little bit more than a week. So I would do a bag or maybe 2 in a night, and let's sit with it for a minute. You could certainly be the kind of person that needs to get everything done in one night.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about some of these sets, and they do tend to be on the expensive side, the Batmobile that I've got waiting for me to build probably next week when we get Wintergeddon again, I can spread it out over 3 or 4 days and have that piece of enjoyment. And again, I'm gonna have a finished product. I'm gonna have a display set for my stuff and be happy with it. But it's not something you have to feel compelled to finish then and there in that moment. And there's some nice stopping points in the process.
No, I definitely I enjoy that too. I'm glad that we got into it. Before we wrap it up, we're going to jump into our features of the week, which is our Longhorn highlight, Aggie highlight, and Astros highlight of the week.
11 yards shy of the record. Williams breaks a hole. Williams, hello record book. Ricky Williams runs to the Hall of Fame, cuts back. Ricky Williams, touchdown!
They've cooled off in that department lately, 4 of 10. Nussmeier back pedaling, running out of time, spinning away, and nobody open. Now he flips it up into traffic and makes a mistake. tried to force the play, and it's intercepted. B.J. Mays rumbling down inside the 10. That's the takeaway LSU was dreading.
1-0. On a 2-1, Alvarez hits a high drive center field. Veer leans back. This game is turned upside down.
Also know that we're going to get into a lot of interesting things over the next couple weeks between now and the time pitchers and catchers report. I think that we have a lot of room on this show to talk about Saturday Night Live because their 50th anniversary shows February 16th.
Definitely going to be topic for sure. Yeah.
That's formative for people of our age. There's a bunch of new movies and IP stuff coming out that I think we're going to be able to explore. And again, baseball's coming right up. College football is about to be over. The NFL, we probably might touch on that for a minute just so Jim can talk about how bad the Cowboys are again this year. But exciting new coach might happen. Who knows?
Well, and you know what else, too? We might get an exciting coach. I do want to say kudos to the LA Rams. You know, as somebody that's in the film business, I have seen more people's lives destroyed by this than I ever would have imagined. So kudos to them for representing LA. And also, Andy, you know, we're going to have to work in some time to talk about the Tiffin Dragons, where I'll be getting my master's degree, the Division II school. So, you know, we can
play
talk
baseball.
About, what's that?
Do they play baseball?
They play baseball
Right.
and they play football. So there we go.
Well, if they play baseball, we can get hats, and that's important.
They will be on your way soon. On the way soon.
Thanks for joining. Like and subscribe. We'll be back later this week with another episode. And if you have topics, you had discussion, join in on our YouTube channel.
Craig Harmon, speak to you.
And anybody else.